Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is The Follow-Up. In fact, this is our first show of Season 9 of The Follow-Up. Thanks for joining us. Now, coming on tonight's show, after months of missed deadlines and delays, state lawmakers finally approved a new state budget for the fiscal year, which began on October 1st. Sticking points included additional funding for roads and education and a controversial increase on cannabis sales. In fact, the governor signed that state budget today. Our three guests tonight will break it all down for us. But first, we would like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on the show. You can do that in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook. You can email us. You can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our shows this season, you can log on to deltapublicmedia.org. For our three guests tonight, they include my good friend Art Lewis from WSGW. We have Jarrett Skorup. He is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. And my other good friend, Bob Schneider. He's a Senior Research Associate for the Citizens Research Council. So thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Lots to get to. So unlike Congress, which shut the government down, state lawmakers approved a budget without a shutdown, as you know, but the process was a bit flawed. Coming 3 months after the legislature simply worked around a state law that says the new fiscal budget needs to be approved by July 1. So much adhering to laws and following deadlines. I guess that's the government. So kind of same old story. So what do you guys sort of make of this process of not meeting deadlines, sort of circumventing state laws and state constitution, and then they come up with this package?
I'm going to make one quick comment.
Go ahead.
You said it was flawed. I say it's normal.
Okay.
It's the way it's been done for a long, long time.
But they don't get this close to
sometimes they get beyond.
Yeah, well, and they shut down the government a few years ago, so I agree. That's a good point, fair point, but should it be that way, right?
I think this year I do think it was a little uniquely unorthodox, although we have had short shutdowns in the past. And I think what made things which threw kind of a wrench into things is the debate on the roads. Mm-hmm. The governor, when she first took office, said we're going to fix the damn roads. We bonded for some money.
I think I did hear her say that.
Yeah,
once
I
or
think
1,000
so.
times.
I told myself I was not going to use that tonight. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, and we bonded for some money, and that helped state roads for a while. But we didn't come up with a more permanent solution. Speaker Hall, the Republican House Speaker, got in front of the issue in November and made a road proposal for $3 billion. The governor followed suit shortly after her budget was introduced with her own $3 billion plan. But when you want to shift a lot of that $3 billion from the budget, you have to do a whole lot of cutting. Mm-hmm. And that can be done, but it's hard, and it made the process a little more intractable. And I was a little surprised, but I'll have to be honest, pleased with the end result through this sort of strange process. I think the end result was actually pretty positive in a lot of ways, and not to mention we had some extra wrenches thrown into the works, in the summer. So
And the governor was dealing with a divided House.
Right, for the first time.
Yep.
She had not seen that before.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that Michigan can be like Congress, and that they have a lot of disagreement, and sometimes, but unlike Congress, constitutionally we got to balance our budget, and so they actually do have to pass a balanced budget. And so some unique things that were in Michigan were, like Bob said, so you're going to pass this balanced budget. We have a lot of this federal COVID money that's disappearing, but we still have these leftover COVID policies. We have a ton of built-in extra money for schools, a ton of built-in money where the cost of state government has increased substantially over the years. And then you had a Republican House take over and basically say, we want to get rid of a lot of that. And you had things like that was important to them. Like we're going to get rid of a lot of these state employees who are not coming into work. But everyone was in pretty good agreement on we're going to increase spending on roads, we're going to increase money on education, and there was details within there that they disagreed about. But for the most part, everybody's kind of singing kumbaya. Both sides are putting out good statements of getting things they wanted. But of course, both sides also, there are things in there that neither side is particularly happy with.
All right, well, let's talk about. Go ahead. Art.
I have a question about the total number. Wasn't too many years ago, just before COVID, budget was like 50 some odd $million.
Yeah.
COVID comes along, the government hands out a pile of money. Here we are post-COVID. How did we get to $81 billion?
I'll give you perspective on that.
And is that the real number? So go ahead.
Well, but that's, yeah. But
Yeah, whatever, whether it's
Okay.
81, I would assert it's probably 84 is the best reflection of what the final budget is.
$1 billion here, $1 billion here. Eventually, Bob,
Among friends,
we're talking
right.
real money.
There's no doubt. So I think the budget went up from, I think it was $58 billion in fiscal year 29 before COVID. I think by 2023 it was up to $85 billion.
2019.
But that was reflective of government, federal money.
Lots of federal money and lots of state.
Well, a lot of state, yep.
money also was going up. It has. So I'll tell you, I think if you go back and look at the size of state government, that same number for between 2000 and 2019 until it took its spike, and you compare it to like the budget relative to like state personal income, broad measure of income in the state, it was about 12.5%. That big run up, it spiked up to 14%. The only time we'd seen that, something similar to that, was Great Recession when we got another boatload of federal money. If you look at the budget now, with whether it's 81 or 84 billion dollars, we are really kind of back to 12.5% again. So we had a big spike in inflation, and some of the federal policies contributed, I think, to that. But incomes have gone up, prices have gone up, the state spending has gone up. If you look at the state budget relative to state income and kind of the size of the economy around it, we are getting a little bit back closer to normal. So there's no doubt the state budget exploded after COVID. But I do think sometimes we overstate how much it's still there. I do think we've returned to a little bit more of as much as the numbers have grown.
Well, yeah, because when I look at those numbers, I say to myself, well, if there's a $28-30 billion increase in the budget in a state that has not seen growth population-wise, are we all making that much more money?
Well, a point I make is, the closest state to Michigan's got 10 million people in this state. North Carolina just passed 11 million. Their budget is almost $20 billion less than ours, their state budget. So we are spending a lot more than a lot of other states. We've added 5,000 state employees under Governor Whitmer. And one of the things you talked about, the road funding, that is interesting. We were happy to see that. I think our roads need more money. That is an important part of state government. I would rather spend it there on things like what has been a priority of the governor of corporate incentives, and a lot more money to education that has not really turned into these better results for students. And so I'm glad to see that shift towards road funding. And for the Fix the Damn Roads governor, it's been funny. The only thing she's done is call for a huge gas tax increase that immediately went down in flames, that nobody supported, and then bond for roads, which is about the worst way to spend money on roads because you're borrowing a bunch of money over 20 years. So you took out a bunch of money to do a short influx in road funding. I'm glad we finally got something like shifting the money at the pump towards road funding. That'll be a dedicated resource for the future.
Yeah, and that money that she bonded all went to federal and state highways, none of it local.
That's correct.
Well, and she's doing
now we're finally seeing some local street money.
So the best time to have done take the sales tax away from the pump, convert it to the motor fuel tax, so we shift that money to roads, which is effectively what happened. Would have been like 3 years ago when we were sitting on a mountain of state fund surpluses, ongoing surpluses, money in the bank for the state. We actually called for that, I think, in late 2022. Look, if you're ever going to do it now. I'm happy it was done now, and that we adjusted the budget as we needed to
And
make it
some
work.
of that was done at the cost of her corporate incentive programs. She lost most of that money.
A good chunk of it.
And what's interesting about that, I'm glad you brought that up, Art, because it was a strategic outreach and attraction program which was providing corporate subsidies to expand and attract business, and also, most notably, the highly successful Pure Michigan campaign and GoPro, which provides worker training and development to retain workers. So some would say so much for economic development. That's a big blow for economic development. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay.
Most of that money was, we call it economic development, it was political development, which is it developed political press releases, but not so much economic growth. So the SOAR fund, I mean, we approved over $1 billion for 9 companies. They created 10% of the jobs that they promised. Her other major program has yet to create any jobs that she talked about. So, I mean, I think the research on those programs is not great. We've been looking at state economic development, so-called economic development programs, where you're taking the corporate tax, you're taxing everybody and redistributing it to a couple of companies. We'd rather that money go to roads, education, something that everybody enjoys, and the government just kind of get out of that business of trying to select the next big company, next big industry, because it's just not been a good record in the past.
And make your laws attractive.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the SOAR fund, I think Jarrett and I are going to be singing from the same hymnal on SOAR fund and these huge business attraction incentives that tend to fail, I think, more often than
We give
they
away the
succeed.
farm, but we have
and
nothing to show for it,
even when
right?
we keep and retain jobs, those jobs become very
Expensive.
expensive
Yeah.
on a per job basis. I think some of the you mentioned Going Pro and some of those are tough programs to cut, in the area of workforce development and developing, apprenticeship type jobs that pay well. But the bulk of those cuts were to those business incentive programs, and I don't think we'll miss those very much.
I think the Great Lakes Bay region, Saginaw Bay, Midland, leave Isabel out for a moment. I think we can be a leader in the state in growth. Corning, 1,500 people. Hemlock Semiconductors looking for a couple of hundred. SK Siltron's looking for a couple of hundred. The question is, and Corning has found 1,400 of them already. Question is, where are you going to house them?
Good point. Very good point. Maybe we should ask the governor that.
Well, I mean,
We'll get her on the show next week.
one significant part of the budget is putting more money into housing, but not in a way that I think is very efficient. It's mostly redistributing federal funds that are coming in. The state is spending a lot of money subsidizing, basically rehabbing apartments, building new apartment buildings. It's an area of the budget I'm hoping will get more bipartisan support. Other states have done it, which is how do you actually create housing? Well, I mean, the obstacle here is a lot of government rules and regulations. So just making it legal to build multifamily homes in different cities, making that zoning process go much quicker. The southern states that are growing in population, almost by necessity, it's much easier to build. Takes about half the time to build a complex in Texas than it does in Michigan. Indiana's much faster than we are here in Michigan. We got to get government out of the way so that we can build a lot faster. And I think there is bipartisan support to do that, and the governor has spoken fairly highly about it.
What's interesting about that, it's middle income, maybe higher end housing, because as opposed to affordable housing, which we need a heck of a lot more of that.
Well, yes, and that's the point, because maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could build a 1,500 square foot starter home, maybe $100 a square, maybe you could sell it for $150,000. Today, that same home at $300 a square and more, you sell for $450,000. That's not a starter home anymore.
Right. Hey, one area of road funding we didn't touch on that was sort of a point of contention and debate, focused up on protests, was this new 24% wholesale tax on the sales of cannabis, and all of that's going.
I knew that would bother you, Mike.
Yeah, I could do a whole show on that. Yes, yeah, hitting us in the pocketbook, people. I didn't say me, but so what do you make of that? That was, some would say that's going to kill the cannabis industry. It's going to customers are going to file to other states because they have to pay too much for the cannabis. So, you want to weigh in
Well,
on that?
there are some will say it'll thin the industry because there's too many.
Might right size it. Some have
Yeah, in
said.
some areas there's way too many shops.
I think I think that is a very high rate, much higher than other states, and enough that it will drive a black market here in Michigan. So I do worry that you're going to have less of that kind of regulated industry and more of that unregulated. It's such a high cost. But the problem is you've got a house that says we're not going to. What are you going to do? Nobody wanted to increase income taxes. There wasn't really much of an appetite to increase corporate or business taxes. So where are you going to go? And the easiest thing was go to kind of the sin taxes. That's what happened in the last budget disputes. They hiked taxes on cigarettes. Sometimes they hike tax on alcohol. This time it was marijuana's term, and so you kind of get a coalition on both sides where one side likes higher taxes, the other side doesn't really like these sin issues, and that's what we ended up with.
And the industry is still, that marijuana industry is still young, and you see openings and closings now all over the place with the marijuana shops and the retailers. I do think one thing when in 2015 when we passed the last road plan, and I found this interesting, and maybe the marijuana sector is kind of coming to grips with the reality of how much taxes they can afford. But in 2015, there were a lot of marijuana advocates coming to us and telling, pot for potholes is your solution.
Yeah.
Pot for potholes. You'll make hundreds of millions, even $1 billion in revenue from legalized marijuana.
This was prior to it being legalized.
Prior to its legalization.
To argue for it to legalize
Yes,
it.
yeah, and I don't think that's the case. I think we realize that this is going to impact the price of marijuana. It's going to impact the viability of marijuana retailers and could shake the industry up a bit. But the tune changed a little bit from 2015.
Let's be honest about it all. Whether it's a tax on marijuana, a fee on your license registration, fishing license, I don't care what it is. Government has no money that we don't give them. No matter what dollar it is, you can trace it back to our pockets. Call it what you want, tax what you want, do what you want. One way or another, we're paying the bill.
But to pay for roads, to that point, there were actual cuts in the budget to different programs. There were actually cuts that some people had to live with, and then that was the main tax increase. And then the other side, which is business kind of had to eat. It wasn't a tax increase on what they were earning, but the federal tax bill was going to set to cut business taxes. They got rid of that to hold the rate steady. So businesses also had to, eat some higher costs than they normally would have to. So, it's a budget with a Democratic governor, Democratic Senate, and a Republican House. This is what you get.
Yeah, there were again. I leave the process feeling pretty good about where we landed. Both sides, there were some difficult tax votes. The decoupling that from the federal tax relief that Jarrett just mentioned. We landed in a pretty good spot. We did raise road funds. We did cut the budget. I will tell you, we've taken a close look at it. We were wondering, okay, did they kick anything down the road?
Yeah.
Did they kick the can down the road? Are we going to have another $400 million in cuts next year when the budget is released in February? We're not. They
That's a real balance.
It's a structurally sound budget that is balanced, not just this year, but it doesn't leave any cutting for next year.
They hit one agency that I'm not real thrilled with. They cut funding, even though it's an increase in their budget. When you look at it, they cut funding to the Michigan State Police. Michigan State Police, I think the number was they got 28 million more, but the increase in trooper salaries is greater than the extra money they received, and it's leading to cuts in operations, posts, and that bugs me. That really worries me a little bit in this day and age.
Some of the State Department cuts, and that being one of them, where you would have these perennially leaving positions open or programs that didn't get funded. One of that for the Michigan State was these trooper schools where they're not finding enough people to go in. So they budgeted extra money for troopers they couldn't find and couldn't hire. And so some of that was a dispute there. And then that was kind of the same across some of these departments. But I go back to what you said earlier, Art, which is we do have, we've had this under this governor, like an 8 or 9% increase in the number of state employees. We're spending a lot more on those state employees. Now, some of that is higher expenses for retirement benefits and things like that. But I think most Michiganders, if you say, are you getting, 9-10% better services than you did 6-7 years ago? The answer is no. And so for me, it always goes back to, are you actually getting the services we expect out of the money that we're doing for government? And in so many of these areas, we are spending more than other states, including our surrounding states, and we're not getting the types of services that I think we would hope for.
Well, let's touch on education a little bit. I'm all saying there's a lot of winners in this, but I'd like to hear you guys expand on that, because I know, Art, you have a pretty good opinion on.
Well,
we're spending a lot of money on education, but are we getting the bang for the buck on that? But
money has never been the answer. Now, do I think teachers should be paid respectfully for what they do? Yes. But just to keep throwing money at it has not seemed to solve the issue. We don't do well nationally against others. The country doesn't do well internationally. And we drop a lot of money on education.
well, for many years, the city of Detroit salaries on teachers was like the highest in the country, and we know what their results are.
Well, and their school board was
Well,
taking a pile out too, so.
not to pick them apart, but that's certainly the
Oh, go
reality.
ahead.
So I'm just going to highlight some of the things in education, let you guys kind of weigh in. Record per pupil funding from about 9,600 and change last year to over 10,000 this year per pupil. Universal free school meals for both public school students and, for the first time, non-public school students. So I found that kind of interesting. So charter schools, parochial schools are going to get some of the funding, which I think the state government and Governor Whitmer hasn't been a real fond of parochial school funding. So is that an opening there on school choice, maybe? And then more money for at-risk students. I can support that, and then additional mental health funding. So you guys want to weigh on, pick that apart a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think the school aid budget changed less than the rest of the general fund budget. And you know, I would agree with Art that we have schools that you know, I would say we're relatively well funded relative to the rest of the nation, and maybe aren't getting the same results. So I would say the one thing that I think, whether it's the right policy or the wrong policy, that school groups may not like, is one of the things in the budget is with the sales tax, that had been applied to gasoline going away. A big chunk of that revenue ends up going to our school aid fund that primarily funds our K-12 schools. There were law changes that ensured that the school aid fund would continue to get reimbursed for that money. They won't lose that money in the school aid fund. The school groups, I think, are a little perturbed that we shifted some in order to make the budget balance on the general fund side. We took about $400 million of that school aid fund and added it to the public universities budget, and then pulled the general fund out. So I think K-12 schools, well, there's some of our money, and now it's going to the universities, and we're never going to see that. We're never going to see that money again. But all in all, I think the school budget, I think the K-12 schools should be pleased with it. I think
they all got more money, and they should be happy. And but there's a ton of waste in the public education budget, and some of it is purposeful, and some of it is not. You said they're now over $10,000 per pupil. That's the foundation allowance. That's like, we're giving the money, follows the student. That's that money. We spend now $24,000 per student in the state of Michigan. If you take the state, local,
$24,000 versus the $10,000 that they
Let's
promote.
put it another way. Art talked about teachers in the classroom. My parents were public school teachers. My wife was a teacher.
Mine were too, by the way.
I love them all.
Right.
$24,000. That's almost $500,000 sitting in the classroom that a teacher's looking out at. They're not getting paid $500,000, so the question is, where's the money going? Now, a lot of it is things that we need, buildings, but now you're talking about universal free lunches. So millionaires' kids, we're going to provide lunches for them. We're going to provide lunches for people outside the public school system. We're going to provide money for free preschool for people regardless of income. So all these new ways that we're spending the money. But there's also another part of that. We are spending way more money on underfunded pension systems and benefits for people who are long retired from the system. That's not their fault. We do need to fund the pension systems. It's a constitutional obligation.
Absolutely.
But the state has mismanaged these programs that now we're talking 35% of payroll costs are going to people that used to teach for the schools. That's government mismanagement, and it's something that all lawmakers going back have had a hand in, and I hope they turn that around and actually get us to a sound pension system so we don't have this problem going forward forever.
There was one piece of it, though, I was glad to see, and that was an increase in the funding for mental health, because they pulled that the last time. And heaven knows, in this day and age, we need it.
In fact, to Jarrett's point, you've got a lot of seniors on fixed income that are counting on that pension money.
Yeah.
They've been counting on it for 40, 50 years that they're not going to see unless we fix it. And that's a shame. And pension money has been pulled from people all over the country, not just states, but cities have really messed that thing up as well. And back to the free school meals for non-public schools. I mean, I could do a whole show on the vouchers. I would hope that we revisit the vouchers for schools. All the surrounding states, most of the surrounding states, Indiana, I think Wisconsin, I think Ohio have vouchers, and they seem to be working. That seems to be fair to everybody. For some folks that are just, their kids just don't get a great education in cities that are having trouble, and are we ever going to see vouchers? It works, but unless we change government.
Well, we also have to separate charter schools from parochial schools, because charter schools technically are public schools.
They are, yep.
Charter schools are public schools. Absolutely. So do you see us visiting that?
It would take so every state touching Michigan has some type of voucher program where you can take the equivalent of that $10,000, go to a private or public school that you want. I think that would be a good move for Michigan. It's very successful in other states. We now have most of the growth states allow that type of program. The only thing I would say on that is it would not just change a law. We'd have to change the Constitution here in Michigan in order to actually do that.
Any last word on anything else that on this whole state budget, as far as the Citizens Research Council is concerned?
I think the end result here was a good one. No kicking the can down the road. Didn't get $3 billion in new road funding, but eventually you're going to get to $2 billion in new road funding. The budget was cut in a way that got votes. Some sacrifices, but the budget works. After a crazy process, I think they came to a deal that did a lot of good.
Would you agree?
Yep. Listen, you're never going to agree 100% with everything in any budget.
Yeah.
Right.
But for the most part, it's okay.
And too bad it's somewhat business as usual, but it sort of is, and we'll go through
government.
this again. You got that right. Guys, it was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on and starting out season 9 with a bang. Good stuff. Thanks so very much. And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next week right here for the follow-up. From tariffs and taxes to interest rates and inflation, it's all about the economy on next week's show. In the meantime, hit me up on social media or dial into our follow-up hotline. We'd really like to hear from you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great night. We will see you right here next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock sharp. See you then.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And make sure to click that bell icon to stay notified when we upload new content. Videos like this are only possible because of viewers like you. To help support this channel, click on the link in the description below. We'll see you next time.